All right, this morning I am going to teach. I'm not going to preach. I want to do some teaching this morning on what I believe is a very, very important topic. So let's go to the Word of God. I'm reading from Proverbs, the 3rd chapter. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them about your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. So you will find favor in the sight of God and man. I like to speak from the subject this morning of God's favor, how to get it and how to keep it. I want to start with the understanding of the difference between favor and grace. In many ways, they are similar, but in some ways, there is a very important distinction. Everyone receives a measure of favor from God. Even if you're not saved, you have a measure of favor from God, even if you never acknowledge it. Jesus said that God causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So every human being, to some extent, is a product or recipient of God's favor. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. So, grace is the means in which God gives salvation. Salvation cannot come to us apart from grace. Grace also encompasses God's given ability to perform, to go through, to even exist. So we read Paul speaking of his toils and his trials, as well as his accomplishments, and he says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace toward me did not prove vain, but I labor even more than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God with me." So if you are anything, and if you are anything in God, you owe it all to grace. You may think you are something because you're smart, or you have certain skills, but without the grace of God, those things would mean nothing. Your accomplishments would be nowhere. He also speaks about in Paul's ability to endure hardship when he prayed and asked God to deliver him from a specific trial. It says, "He said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness.'" So again, grace is the God-given ability for you to go through things, for you to make accomplishments. Grace is what got you saved. Grace is what keeps you saved. Now, favor, when we read in our text, do not let kindness and truth leave you. He's given us something to do. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablets of your heart, and by doing so, you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. Again, it says, blessed is the man who listens to me. This is wisdom speaking. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at my doorpost. For he who finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. So, grace is always undeserved and unearned. You can't do anything to obtain God's grace. He gives that to you. You will never deserve it. You will never be in a place where you can stand up and say, I didn't need God's grace. I reached a certain plateau and I can take it from here. You'll never be in that place. So grace is always undeserved and unearned. Favor, on the other hand, is a response to your words and actions. Favor is a response. Favor is a reaction to what you do, to how you live your life, to the things you say, to the choices that you make. And those choices and actions and words will determine how much, if any, favor you receive from God or anybody else. Now, the Bible speaks much about the people of God who obtained favor. We read about many of our biblical heroes. We read them with admiration. We admire their dedications and devotions. We're impressed with how God used them. But if you read carefully, there's often a very common thread through all of the people that are used by God. Mary, for instance, it says, the angel said to her, do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. Mary found favor with God. Even Jesus, in his growing up, it says, Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. Now, in order to increase in wisdom, stature, and favor, that means at some point you didn't have it. So to increase in those things mean that you added to. These things were added to you. Notice also that the favor was not only with God, but it was with men as well. Daniel, in his famous stories of him being thrown to the lions and things like that, it says, now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. Even back with Noah, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. You see this thread, this common thread through the people of God. These were men that had obtained, not automatically had, but had obtained favor, that have found favor. The nation of Israel, when they were called out of Egypt, and you see the movie and you read the story, there's little subtle things that we can often overlook like it says, I will grant this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. So not everybody hated the Israelites during this time. Pharaoh did not, in fact, represent all of the people of Egypt at that time, because God had granted the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And what happens as a result? And it shall be that when you go out, you will not go out empty-handed. The Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Furthermore, the man Moses himself was greatly esteemed in the land of Egypt, both in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, not Pharaoh, but Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. So it says that when they left Egypt, the Egyptians gave them stuff. You wonder how they came up with that gold to do some of the things like the temple, the tabernacle rather, and including the golden calf. Where did these slaves get this gold? Well, it was the Egyptians. They loaded them up and sent them on their way. Why did that happen? Because God granted them favor. Even the early church, in the beginning of Acts, it says that the church day by day continuing with one mind in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved. So even the early church had obtained favor amongst the people. Now, we know that the church was persecuted, and it was. And the church had hostilities to deal with. They most certainly did. But we should remember that that was also balanced with people that were appointed to bless them. We like to think that because we're saved, no one should like us. And sometimes it seems like we even pride ourselves with how many people don't like us. I'm preaching hard now. And you go on your job, somebody ought to like you. Everybody doesn't have to disdain you because you're a Christian. Let's get controversial here. I'm known for saying some unorthodox things, so here goes. In our Declaration of Independence, it talks about all men are created equal. Now, that certainly wasn't even true for America. At the time that it was written, black people were not equal. The Native Indians were not equal. Women were not considered equal. Okay, those are things that came much later, much, much later. So it wasn't even true of this country, but it certainly is not true in reality. It's not true in the church. Everybody, in fact, is not equal. We have differences. There are differences in capacity. There are differences in intelligence. There are differences in gifts. And while we may all have value before God, we are, in fact, different. Everybody doesn't have what you have. Everybody's not as good looking as me. All right. You get the point. We have differences. Everybody is not equal. It's a nice thought to think that we're all equal, but we're not equal. And why is it that some people of God seem to advance and conquer and have victory, and others struggle? And that's why this message is so important, because your success, your victories, your deliverances often have more to do with you than they have to do with God. You may think that you're not getting the victory because God is not interested in delivering you. And that's not often the case. The case is that we don't know how to be blessed. We don't know how to get favor. We don't know how to receive from God. I've been preaching over the past weeks messages like getting in sync, throwing out garbage. These are things that you have to do. And your ability and willingness to do those things will determine just how victorious you are in your life. And that's not to say everything's going to work your way if you do these things. But what it does say is that maybe you are struggling more than you need to be. Maybe you are living more beneath your privilege than God is intending you to. Everyone is not equal. In the parable of the sower, this here becomes apparent. We're not going to go through the whole parable, but I want to highlight some verses here. The parable of the sower, we know the sower, he that sows the seed, is the Son of Man, and the seed is the word. So there's one sower, and there's one word being sowed. There's one seed. There's not different types of seeds here. There's one seed, but there are 4 different responses to that one seed. There are 4 different responses to the work of the sower. So we read, he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, behold, a sower went out to sow, and he sowed, and some seeds fell beside the road, fell by the wayside, and birds ate them. So some seeds went in a certain direction. Others fell on the rocky places. It goes on, it says, others fell among thorns, and others fell on good soil. So here, in the parable of the sower, everybody, in fact, is not equal. Everybody did not have the same response to the word. What's even more interesting is the one soil that did produce, even that was not equal. Notice it says that those that fell on good ground, some were 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. So even the good soil, there were different responses. Not everybody yielded 100%. Some yielded 60%. Some yielded 30%. How much are you yielding? Are you producing 100%? Or are you producing 30%? Everyone's not equal. Well, how do we get to that 100%? What makes us more productive as Christians? I talked about the early church having favor with God and men. Even during their persecution, they found favor with men. Here's one specific example. We read about Peter and John, who healed a lame man sitting at the temple. And it caused a ruckus before the Sanhedrin. It says, but when they heard this, they were cut to the quick and intended to kill them. So early in the game, Peter and John are on death row. They're in danger of being murdered. What happens? But a Pharisee named Gamaliel a teacher of the law, respected by all the people, stood up in the council and gave orders to put the men outside for a short time. Notice this man is a Pharisee. If anyone were hostile toward Jesus and the followers of Jesus, it was the Pharisees. And yet a Pharisee stands up and defends Peter and John. After some discussion, he said to them, "Men of Israel, take care what you propose to do with these men. So in the present case, I say to you, stay away from these men and let them alone. For if this plan or action is of men, it will be overthrown. But if it is of God, you will not be able to overthrow them, or else you may even be found fighting against God." It's an example of how God uses a person, someone who theoretically is an enemy, and uses that person to grant favor to the church. So what is favor? Favor is God's channels of blessings designed for your growth and advancement. There are people, there are situations that God will put into your life with the purpose to advance you. So I want to be blessed. I want God to do things for me. I need miracles to happen in my life. How does that happen? How does God get to you his blessings? Well, more often than not, he uses people. He'll set people in your life there to bless you. And sometimes these people don't even have to be saved. There are people that are in the world, want nothing to do with God, and yet they'll end up blessing you. Say, why does that happen? Because God's favor comes through these channels of blessings. We had a bunch of sinners shovel our snow for nothing. Why would they do that? A tax-exempt property? That's God's favor. That's how he does these things. He sets up channels of blessings. Now, favor is illustrated in the story of Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite. She's not an Israelite. She's a heathen. She's a pagan. She's one of the enemies of Israel. And this woman ends up becoming the great-grandmother of David, King David. How does that happen? In the story, it illustrates certain principles on how these kinds of things happen. We know the famous proclamation from Ruth to Naomi. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. And your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." We're going to get back to that in a second, but as the story goes on, and she meets Boaz, a rich guy, she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your sight?" Isn't that the question we're asking this morning? How do you get favor? This is what Ruth is asking Boaz. Why are you being so good to me? What did I do that's causing you to be so nice to me? What did I do that's causing you to bless me, that you should take notice of me since I am a foreigner? Well, Boaz gives an answer. Boaz replied, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me. and how you left your father and your mother and your land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. So Ruth obtained favor from Boaz by how she treated her mother-in-law. What did I say? Favor is a reaction, is a response to what you do. Honor gains you access, and access gains you favor. Ruth honored Naomi. That gave her access to Boaz, and Boaz granted her favor. You see the chain of reaction. Well, I want to honor people. We think honor people means just to be respectful. Well, if I say Mr. and ma'am, you think that that's honor. But honor is much more than that. Gratitude is proof of honor. Thankfulness is proof of honor. Praise is proof of honor. Giving is proof of honor. And I don't mean giving money or stuff, though it can mean that. I mean giving of yourself. Again, I've often talked about my different experiences in churches. And I've seen some preachers will walk into a church and there's nothing they can do for themselves. You have people coming from all over. Can I get you a cup of coffee? Can I get you something to drink? May I take your coat? And then I've seen other preachers go into the church and have to stand in line and get served lunch. Now, do I think preachers, pastors ought to be lifted up and high? No, I don't. But honor gives you access, and honor gives you access, and access gives you favor. Honor produces favor. Now, you say, let's go back to Naomi. You say, well, she's a sweet little old lady. It's easy to honor her. But let's look at Naomi. Naomi said, do not call me Naomi. Naomi, the name means pleasant. So she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Myra. The name Myra means bitter. She says, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. She goes on, I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has witnessed against me and the Almighty has afflicted me? Naomi, by definition, is a miserable old lady. She thinks God did this to me. She thinks God was her problem. So when we talk about honoring, and you think it was easy for Ruth to honor Naomi because the assumption she was just this holy, sweet lady, no. You know what it's like to be around a miserable person? Don't look at me. It's not always easy to honor everybody. It doesn't mean that when you show honor, that they're necessarily deserving of the honor. But identify your source. God uses channels of blessings like a pipeline. So who and what is God using to bless you? Know who God puts into your life to produce your blessing. You might be surprised. Certain people that you wouldn't think. Why did they come into my life? Knowing who to honor and who to identify as your source is not always apparent. It's not a matter of who does for you. Because some people who do things for you, they might just be trying to manipulate you. Some people who give you opportunities, they're thinking about themselves. So how do you identify? It's not so much who's doing for you, who's giving you stuff. It's much more than that. Who puts up with you? Who endures you? Who takes you for better or for worse? Who puts up with you when you go off? When you go off the wall and you snap, but they're still there. Those are the kinds of people that you need to identify as being a possible source. It's not just someone who does something for you. Like I said, they may just be trying to get something from you. In the case of Abraham, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to a land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. You know what that means? That he was going to be a channel of blessing. So if that's the case, if Abraham moved into your neighborhood, what would be the smartest thing for you to do? To get next to that person. Because if you bless him, you get a blessing. Favor is transferable. Favor is transferable. What do I mean by that? God will give favor to one person, and that favor that he gives one person can end up on you, just from osmosis, from proximity. Look at Zaccheus. This is a tax collector who robbed people, and that's how he got his money. It says, and when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him, Zaccheus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house. And he hurried and came down and received him gladly. He received God. He received Jesus. In other words, he's honoring him. Come to my house. Now, notice the people, when they saw it, they began to grumble, saying, he has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. The people had a problem with what Jesus was doing. Zaccheus stopped and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, half of my possessions I will give to the poor. And if I defrauded anyone of anything, I will give back 4 times as much. So what happened? This one man, when he had an experience with Jesus, all of a sudden becomes a blessing to everyone in that region. Even the people that were complaining are now going to be a beneficiary of Zaccheus. Everybody got a raise from one man meeting Jesus. I know I'm going to go over a little bit, but it's snowing now. You have nowhere to go anyway. So, no one illustrates the principles of favor more than Joseph of Egypt. It says, now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant. And he made him overseer of his house and all that he owned in his charge. And it came about that from the time he made him overseer of his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on the account of Joseph. So what do we have here? Potiphar likes Joseph, and he likes what he sees. And Potiphar takes him in and promotes him to be over his house. This is a slave, by the way. And he promotes him. And what happens as a result of that? Potiphar gets blessed because Joseph is blessed. Favor is transferable. Now, the story goes on because favor doesn't mean everything always works your way, and he's falsely accused. He's thrown into prison. It says, so Joseph's master took him and put him into jail and placed him where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in jail. Well, what happens next? But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. Everywhere he went, he got favor. In the beginning of Joseph's story, when they saw him from a distance and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. This is his brothers looking to kill him. And they said one to another, here comes this dreamer. Favor creates envy. If you are favored of God, you can count on jealousy. If you are favored from God, you can count on criticism. You can count on people nitpicking and trying to bring you down. You can count on trouble. You can count on hostilities. You can count on trouble. So, who needs favor? Why would anybody want favor if it invites problems, if it invites envy? The reason why is because one day of favor can get you what years of hard work won't. You can get in one day of God's favor what somebody else would need years and years to work. Why does this person get that promotion when he's not qualified, when there are others that are qualified, more qualified? Why are you liked by the boss seeming more than others? Why do you end up with certain advantages that others have apparently deserved more? Because that's what favor will do for you. And in the case of Joseph, in the commentary in the New Testament, it says, the patriots became jealous of Joseph and sold him to Egypt, yet God was with him and rescued him from all of his afflictions and granted him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and made him governor over Egypt and all of his household. It was favor that in one day took Joseph from the prison into the palace. One day he's a slave. One day he's in jail. And the next day he's ruling over Egypt. How does that happen? It happens with favor. So, how do you get favor? What brings you favor? Is favor just given because God likes that person and doesn't like that one? Is favor just showered upon certain people but not on others? How do I get God's favor? Is there something that I can do? Is there something I should be doing that will bring me more favor with God and with men? Sowing favor brings favor. Who do you bless? There's some people there love God to open doors, make ways, deliver, take the heights, and do nothing for anyone else. Won't lift a finger to help anybody else. But when they're in trouble, where's God? Why isn't he doing this for me? So sowing favor brings favor. Now I want to show you a verse in Ephesians. I talked about it many times, but it's so important. It's such an important principle. Paul is talking to the church, and he's talking to slaves. Slaves. He says, slaves, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in the sincerity of your heart as to Christ. He says, serve your master like you would serve Christ. not by way of eye service as men pleasers. In other words, not just when someone's looking, even when they're not looking, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. With goodwill render service as to the Lord, and not to men. Why? Knowing that whatever good thing each one does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether slave or free. In other words, this applies to everybody, not just slaves. Now, this sounds a lot like the golden rule, which says, so in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. This sums up the law and the prophets. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Not as they do unto you, as you would like them to do unto you. That's the golden rule. This is not really the golden rule. This is a little bit different. It says, whatever good thing one does, this he will receive back from the Lord. Another way of saying it is, what you do for others, God will do for you. So when you talk about sowing favor, well, who am I going to sow to? Well, I sow to this guy, but he doesn't appreciate it. But what you do for others, God will do for you. Again, in another occasion, he says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. It's whatever you sow, you will reap. Not to whom you sow, you will reap. And this is what stops a lot of people. Well, I did for this person and they don't appreciate it. Well, I went to that church, I tried to help and no one said thank you. What you sow, you reap. Not where you sow. The people that you sow to may not ever say thank you. The people that you do for may not ever acknowledge you. But what you do for them, God will return to you in favor. So when you talk about sowing favor, don't look to just the people who may appreciate it. Know that whatever you do, even if they're your enemies, even if they take advantage of you, what you do for them, you can count on God doing for you. Finally, remember that there was a new king that arose over Egypt that did not know Joseph. What does this mean? You can lose favor just as fast as you get it. I have seen the people of God lose favor. I have seen the people of God who were being blessed. God would send people into their lives, and those people would disperse out of their lives. And they look back and why? Why did that person leave? Why did my situation change? And oftentimes you lose favor because you never honored the favor. You never recognized where your source was coming from. Favor is not extended to those who need it. Favor is extended to those who value it. All of us need favor. All of us can use more favor. You don't get favor just because you need it. You get favor when you value it. Who has God put in your life that is making a difference in your life? When you identify that person, you make sure you bless them. Why? Because he will bless you for blessing them. If God has put you in a circumstance, in a church, in a situation that is advancing you, that is causing you growth, are you valuing that? Are you recognizing that this is the channel of blessing that God has put in my life? Or are we just going to take it for granted and then end up losing it? Favor comes to those who value it, not just those who need it. Finally, the pursuit of God brings favor. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at my doorposts. For he who finds me finds life and obtains favor. The Lord is my portion. I have promised to keep your words. I sought your favor with all of my heart. Be gracious to me according to your words. Seek God's favor. Value God's favor. Why above all? Because the believer who has God's favor is unstoppable. If you have God's favor, there's nothing that can get in your way. If you have God's favor, there's no demon in hell that can stop you from moving forward. If you have God's favor, it doesn't matter who's criticizing you. It doesn't matter what enemies come against you. The enemy can come against you like a flood, but the Spirit of God will lift up a standard. When you recognize and value the favor of God, and to know that it's his favor that will advance you no matter what your skill level is, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much money you don't have. If you have God's favor, there's nothing that can keep you down. If you love the Lord, give him a praise.